I'm Julie, and I'd like to share with you a perspective on forgiveness and how forgiveness changes lives. On Tuesday the 30th of July this year, I attended a restorative justice meeting where I came face to face with the man who killed my partner. The meeting wasn't a recent idea, and I've been building up to it since my partner's death 8 years ago, which is when I first became aware of restorative justice. Now, for those of you who don't know what it is, restorative justice is where the perpetrator and victim get the chance to meet and resolve some of the issues relating to the crime, and also it's a really good opportunity for the victim to get questions answered. Now, for 8 years I'd tried to meet with this man, but for various reasons it just hadn't happened. My own reasons for wanting the meeting were very different in the beginning compared to when the meeting actually took place. Like many other people who've lost someone through murder or manslaughter, I needed to know answers, and I needed to know the finest detail of everything, mainly because my partner's death was so quick and sudden, and I didn't have time to prepare. Now, the man responsible did answer some of my questions soon after he killed my partner, because I wrote to him via the probation service. When he responded to my letter, I thought that a door of opportunity had opened for dialogue, and that all my questions would be answered, but I didn't realise it wasn't going to happen quite that way. Now, you might wonder why I didn't ask everything in that just one letter. Well, to be honest, I was scared. I was scared that he would feel suffocated and then he wouldn't tell me anything. So I didn't really want to push him away. Anyway, over the coming months, I wrote lots more letters to him, but none of them were answered. Luckily for me, the police officer who attended the scene of my partner's death, he was kind and compassionate, and later he agreed to sit down with me and help me as much as he could with the things I needed to know. So most of my questions were really answered, but it's so hard to explain that there was still a void. And the worst and most degrading thing of it all was the only person who could have filled that void at the time was my partner's killer. It's a heartbreaking thing to say, but it's true. He was the only person who could have comforted me in the way I needed at that time, but he just chose not to answer my letters. Anyway, the next 2 years following my partner's death were consumed with adjourned court cases, the trial, and of course my partner's funeral. Not to mention trying to come to terms with my loss. My partner died as a result of stabbing, so there wasn't just one autopsy, there were 2. And the thought of that being done to someone that you love is quite devastating. Looking back at that time, my life was a terrible place to be. It felt incredibly lonely living with the non-stop pain and heartache, and still no response to my letters. And I kept thinking to myself, the very least that he can do for me is write back, even if he's got nothing to say to me. Now, some people say that we go through 5 stages of grief, but I don't necessarily agree with that, because we're all made uniquely. And I personally didn't experience 5 stages. My stages went like this. He's killed my partner, so now I want him dead. Those were my 5 stages of grief. Now, as a Buddhist, forgiveness is key to my beliefs. I've been Buddhist for many years, and every day of my life I talk about compassion, forgiveness, and I practice it. But it doesn't quite work so easily when it's your loved ones who are hurt. You see, as I've said, this man killed my partner for no reason by stabbing him. He did it repeatedly with a kitchen knife. So it's hard to explain the mishmash of emotions that go around in your head after something like this happens. Anyway, much later I discovered the real reasons why my letters never got answered. In fact, they were never given to him by the prison staff. They told me this later because they felt it inappropriate at the time, and they felt it might interfere with his recovery. But I really wish I'd known about this, because what they did was help me to build a distorted picture of him as a cold-hearted bastard, really. Now, for some people who know me, they might feel this is a really good description of him, but that's their view, not mine. You see, eventually finding forgiveness for this man wasn't difficult, not when I consider the alternative, which was being stuck in a place where anger and pain were eating me like a cancer. It was munching away at me from the inside. In fact, forgiveness was the best decision I ever made, but it took a great deal of work, both through meditation and, of course, later meeting with him. The killing of my partner changed my life. Don't get me wrong when I talk about forgiveness. I did grieve. I went through a horrendous time of missing my partner, thinking that I could see him in the street, following people thinking they were him. Everything about my life changed on so many levels. My job as a substance misuse social worker changed because psychologically I couldn't work with alcohol users anymore. You see, my partner was murdered by someone under the influence of alcohol. Another part of my work role included working in prisons, but I never knew which prison he was going to be in. So I constantly lived in that worry that I might see him, so I couldn't do that any longer. Everything I'd studied and worked so hard for became irrelevant overnight. Every aspect of my life was consumed by what had happened, not to mention my future and all my plans with my partner, which were really torn apart in one stupid moment. So for 8 years I've tried to meet with this man, not with revenge in my heart, but forgiveness. But each time I've asked, he's refused. Nevertheless, I kept trying despite his constant digging his heels in. Anyway, 8 years later, and having been moved to a different prison, he finally requested to meet with me. The meeting went ahead and it was facilitated by mediation professionals. And to be honest, by the time I got to the meeting, all I wanted to do was embrace him and tell him, look, you're forgiven. I had no questions to ask because I'd reached a point in my life spiritually and emotionally where they just weren't necessary anymore. You see, my partner's gone. There's no point digging all that pain back up. There's no point for either of us. So I just wanted him to know I'd forgiven him. I didn't want him to suffer anymore for what he'd done. Now it's time we both got on with our lives, and I needed him to know that. When we did eventually meet, I was ready emotionally and mentally, and it was the fact that I'd learned to forgive that prepared me so well. You see, Tibetan Buddhists, which is the type of Buddhism I follow, we believe that we're all born over and over again, sometimes as human and sometimes not. And these rebirths depend upon the karma we bring with us from our past lives. To be reborn into this life as a killer is, I believe, really tragic, and it deserves only compassion. Also, I felt a sense of personal responsibility towards this man, to help him change the direction of his life. And through compassion and meditation, I was able to do this. So our meeting ended with me embracing him, and also from him a reluctant but positive acknowledgement of my forgiveness. So from a personal perspective, it's true. Compassion can heal any problem, no matter how big, but it must be genuine. And the only way to develop this is through meditation. To remain stuck in anger will, I believe, eventually consume you from the inside like a cancer. It will do this without the other person even being aware. Your loved ones will still be gone, through no fault of their own, but you will be effectively committing suicide. So, to forgive is actually to feel true liberation from anger, pain, stress and regret. Thank you.